Welcome to the Astrology Star Sisters Talk Over Tea. Today's topic is Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius and the five-pointed stars. And my star sister today is Madam Simon. Hi, Simon. Welcome. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Liz. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I always enjoy having you on the show. So we're going to get right to it. So to get a hold of Madam Simon, her website is iconalchemy.com, and my website is alightpath.com, and we enjoy hearing from you. So Mercury is in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is a mutable sign, and mutable is adaptable, evolving, and can be a little restless. And the ruling planet of Sagittarius is Jupiter. It's a fire element, assertive, passionate, energetic. And the mantra is I seek. And a few keywords are philosophical, adventurous, farseeing, spontaneous, idealistic, and motivational. And a caution is arrogant, unreliable, quick-tempered. And do you have anything to add to that, Simon?
Well, Jupiter, of course, rules travel. And so there is that seeking new horizons kind of element to Sagittarius. Sagittarius is also associated with our beliefs. So when a planet is transiting Sagittarius, then how that planet acts is going to connect with our beliefs. Okay, so that can be both our beliefs or quote unquote lack thereof for those of us who are concerned with questions of faith. If one is an atheist, for example, one's quote unquote lack of belief in one thing may be very strong belief in something else, a very strong belief in, no gods, no masters. So I definitely feel that emphasizing belief is important in looking at this particular Mercury retrograde.
That's a good idea. And we're talking about Mercury. Mercury will be retrograde November 25th through December 15th. Mercury travels between the worlds, the upper world, the world, and the underworld. I guess we could say it that way. Mercury stations retrograde 3 to 4 times a year. And this shadow phase began on November 8th and will last until January 2nd. Mercury is a personal planet. Mercury is about communication, our neighborhood, siblings, short distance travel, quick thinking, and the mind and intellect. Would you like to add anything?
So Mercury definitely relates to commerce, can relate to a communication that is, for example, negotiation. There's a reason why we're often advised not to sign contracts during a Mercury retrograde, because both the communication of writing and signing that contract and the transactional nature of that contract are both governed by Mercury. And it should be noted that Mercury is both a psychopomp, able to travel between the worlds, but also a trickster. So, and I think that's why, yes, Mercury retrogrades happen these multiple times a year and tend to be the most well-known of the retrogrades. But I think part of that is just because of Mercury's tricky nature.
Exactly. And if you do have to sign a contract, read it, 2, 3, 4 times, maybe get some advice on what you're going to sign, whether it's a lawyer or somebody that has knowledge with that. Just take your time with it, take it home and maybe don't sign it for a day or two.
Yes, discernment is a big factor with regard to that kind of thing in Mercury retrograde. And from personal experience, while it can be helpful to get advice from, folks who are supposedly older and wiser or are experts, I personally have found that expert advice is not always so expert under Mercury retrograde.
That can happen, I suppose. Hope that doesn't happen to anybody. So Mercury Stations Retrograde November 25th at 12 degrees Pisces and 41 minutes at 6:43 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here in Seattle area. And in this chart, it's circled in a purple color in the 6th house of work, service, and duty. And when this Mercury goes retrograde, the sun-moon phase will be the balsamic moon phase. And that phase is about finishing up things to get ready to start new projects. And it might even be a big time out possibly for people. Don't schedule as many things, one for Mercury retrograde and the balsamic moon phase, because when Mercury goes retrograde, oftentimes appointments and meetings get changed the times, or miscommunication. Like the other day, I was going to talk with a friend and we had scheduled it for a Thursday, but we had it on different weeks of what Thursday we were going to talk. And it wasn't even Mercury retrograde yet, but that's an example of what can occur. It's just a misunderstanding. Nothing big about it, but it's like we just rescheduled, and so it'll happen. Do you want to say anything about the balsamic moon?
So the balsamic moon, that's the tail end of this disseminating moon, okay, where the moon is at the end of the lunar cycle. It already reached its peak with the full moon in terms of what your intentions for that cycle have been. And now it's time to kind of let go of what you couldn't get accomplished, wind down a bit in terms of your energy and your reactions to things, and become perhaps a bit more introspective and prepare then to incubate new intentions at the new moon, and then set those intentions at the first crescent moonlight. So this is definitely it's that winding down feeling. And when you combine that with the revisiting thing, it's very interesting. I think that there is a need to create and allow for space and extra time during this Mercury retrograde because of that.
Yes, I like to allow more time, because it's like a lot of information is coming in, and it's like I need time to process it, and maybe I can take notes, and work on that later. Or it's a Mercury retrograde is a really good time to do research though, and finish up old projects. And then we have a few planets out of bounds. And out of bounds is when the declination of a planet exceeds 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south. Planets are out of the bounds of the sun, and they act on their own and act out of character. So the moon is out of bounds from November 17th through the 20th, December 1st through the 5th, the 14th through the 18th, and the 28th through January 1st. Mercury is out of bounds when Mercury stations retrograde, and Mercury's been out of bounds since November 7th through the end of the month on the 30th. Venus has been out of bounds since October 27th until December 3rd, in series from April 2nd until January 15th of next year. And then here's an aspect key for those that would find this useful. And then we have the aspects for the Mercury Stations Retrograde. Do you want to start, Simon?
So I'm going to start out with that conjunction. It would be an applying conjunction to Pallas Athena, except it's going to be moving backwards, right, from that. So it's it's effectively separating from Pallas. And I'd like you to think about the symbolism of that one for a moment, because Mercury is our thoughts and our communication. Pallas is our wisdom, our planning, our tactical, strategic mind. Okay. And so I would suggest that this can relate to and perhaps amplify the unraveling of our plans. Note also that Mercury is opposing Jupiter. And I've talked about this before, this opposition with Jupiter, each of them in each other's signs, but each of them retrograde and in their detriment. Neither one enjoys being in those signs. They feel like they don't have the resources to do things the way that they want to do. They're having to do things by the other planet's rules. Okay. And, it's in a way that is challenging for them. Mercury, who rules Gemini, likes to gather information, likes to be quick and light, and likes to get a lot of little things, right? Lots of little bits of information. But Jupiter is about the bigger picture. Okay. And Jupiter and Sagittarius are also about, I said this before, belief. And so I feel like this combination is where we are being asked to re-examine our beliefs and the information that has fed those beliefs, for good or ill. Okay. That includes, in particular, misinformation that may have fed our beliefs when we see this state of, mutual reception, mutual deception, the blind leading the blind. These planets both want to help each other, but they are really poorly resourced right now. And they're just not at their best. It's kind of like two drunk friends stumbling down the street, and they're really trying to help each other home, but they're having difficulty knowing which way to go and how to do so. I also think that this very much relates to how do we think about our beliefs? How do we communicate about them? How do our own thoughts feed into our beliefs? And in particular, because Jupiter makes whatever he touches bigger, it would then be, how do things get blown out of proportion in relation to our beliefs as a result of thought or communication or information/misinformation? Okay. We also see that this is that this Mercury Pallas combination is squaring off against Neptune. And Neptune brings lots of fogginess and confusion to the picture. And so that just continues to emphasize that logic and intellect and fact are not likely to be very clear during this time. And that is also something that is challenging us to grow, to not simply rely on what we've been told or what we have thought, especially not to rely on the sort of ingrained patterns of communication. You get this kind of like feedback loop going between the massive amount of information that we've been taking in with Jupiter in Gemini, and then our thoughts about our beliefs and the way that we talk about them. And Mercury in Sagittarius can have a bit of can be a bit over the top, bit of a loudmouth. And so I would say that the best advice I can give in relation to this is stop and pause and maybe take a deep breath before you say things or before you engage in sort of knee-jerk reaction thinking that that reinforces beliefs that might not be helpful. This is a chance for us to re-examine our beliefs. And that includes beliefs about not having beliefs. And then the quincunx to Uranus suggests that this is all part of that greater cycle of change that we've been seeing with the outer planets and with the various transits we've been having involving Uranus this year. Big changes afoot on a worldwide level. And so this Mercury Uranus quincunx, it's like our own little minds and our own thoughts about our beliefs may not be able to see the big picture about those changes right now, may feel confused and, a little bewildered and shaken up by the changes that are going on. But even though they don't necessarily understand each other, they still have a relationship with each other. We still have to figure out ways to adjust to the changes going on around us. And finally, that trine to Chiron and Eris. Chiron certainly can indicate that there is an opportunity to do some work on healing ourselves, particularly when it comes to difficulties with feeling independent, with feeling capable, or issues of, say, toxic masculinity, or our very young Western culture that is so driven and oriented toward achievement, perhaps to our detriment. And then you combine that with Eris, and Eris likes to shake things up. Goddess of discord, warrior goddess, an equivalent to Mars, but I would say she is less impulsive than Mars and more, again, she's got more of that trickster energy. So when you've got a couple of tricksters trying each other, watch out. She really likes to deflate those who are full of hot air. And kind of put the powerful in their place when they are being excessive or thinking too highly of themselves. So that's what I got on those
Well,
aspects.
thank you. That was good. And I would just say that maybe some plans that you've made might need some readjustments or replanning or more information to come, because maybe the information that you had about whatever you were going to do, say you're going to go on a trip, and it's like maybe it's not the best time of year to go where you're planning because you want to be outside and it's too cold. It's like just kind of make those adjustments and it'll probably be just fine. And I would suggest keeping notes of, since Jupiter's in Gemini and Mercury is opposite, that it just feels to me like that there's a lot of information coming through, and some of it might be very useful in the future to use on a project or something or you could share that information with somebody else that needs that information. Okay, and then with the Mercury station retrograde, we have quintiles, which are 72 degrees, and biquintiles, which are double the 72, which is 144 degrees. So it makes a 5-pointed star or a pentagram, and this one's a little lopsided, but anyway, we'll go to another one later on, and you'll be able to see it a little bit better. And one of the points is Mars in Leo, then Mercury and Pallas in Sagittarius, Uranus in Taurus, Vesta in Libra, Saturn and the midheaven in Pisces. And it also kind of reminds me of the 5-pointed star is the Venus star point cycle of how that works too. So it's reminding me of that, even though they're probably not in the same signs as the Venus star points, but it reminds me of that. What would you like to say about the pentagram and the 5-pointed star?
So it's interesting. When I first saw this, I was kind of excited because the pentagram is, of course, a symbol that is associated with witches, with modern pagans. It is also, interestingly enough, in medieval times, was associated with the Virgin Mary. Okay. It is, so it's formed out of quintiles around the edges and the biquintiles crossing it. Okay. And quintiles and biquintiles are associated with creativity and hidden gifts. Okay. Things that you might be good at or be able to access within you, but you don't necessarily have a conscious awareness of them. Okay. Now this one is interesting because it's it's this combination of the greater and lesser malefic. Okay, Saturn being the greater malefic and Mars being the lesser malefic. Then we've got our trickster Mercury hanging out with Pallas. Both Pallas and Saturn try to bring us wisdom. Okay, but Saturn, as a malefic, tends to do so in ways that we might find a little challenging or uncomfortable. The malefics they're not out to get us, but they do tend to do things in ways that humans find less pleasant. So, for example, Mars can be combative, can be divisive. But on the other hand, if you're an athlete, you really like Mars because Mars is your action and your drive and your ability to get things done. Okay. So here we've got those malefics. Then we've got Uranus. Now, depending upon who you ask, there are certainly some astrologers who view the outer planets as having something of a malefic nature to them. Specifically because they're operating on this transcendental level, on this transpersonal level, in ways that can be a little difficult for individuals to understand and feel comfortable with. Typically, when we have a big outer planet transit in our lives, we can feel like we are being remade from the ground up, and that is a very uncomfortable feeling. Even if you get great wisdom, great gifts out of it, it still is kind of a challenging process. And then we've got Vesta. And Vesta is, we'll be talking about where she is in relation to Lilith shortly. But Vesta in Libra is this focus then on the social contract, on social balance, in the wake of Vesta's conjunction to the South Node. earlier this fall. And so there's that kind of this emerging from this space of feeling loss of our social equilibrium, both on an individual and on a larger societal level. And then starting to try to refocus how we are thinking about that, how we are working with that, and how we're communicating about that, and how we are connecting. You mentioned Venus. Well, Venus rules Libra. So Vesta in Libra then is going to be concerned with connections, and also with fairness. And you will note that she is squaring off against Venus at this time. Okay. So then if we are looking at this pentagram as dealing with creativity and hidden gifts, this is creativity and hidden gifts between a bunch of planets that operate in ways we may not always enjoy and that we can have some struggles with. And, here is Mercury conjoining Pallas there at one of those points and stationing retrograde. So there's a real need to reconsider what are our beliefs around how we can or cannot handle challenging circumstances in our lives, both on the personal and on the societal level. And then I like to think of this as being a little bit about how can we find a silver lining in our hardships or in our conflicts or in the sudden changes that may kind of knock us off our balance for a little bit. How can we refocus in a way that's going to get some real wisdom and mileage out of this once Mercury's ready to station direct and head back into a conjunction with Pallas again?
Well said, well said. And I like to look at, that Saturn and Mars and even the Uranus of the hard work that we need to put in to make the changes. And, if we learn from whatever our lesson might be or what we need to learn, we can move forward in wonderful ways. Okay, and then now we have the Lilith corridor, and Simon's going to talk about that for us.
So as I mentioned with the previous slide where we were talking about that pentagram, Vesta right now is smack dab within the Lilith corridor. We've got the natural Lilith at 11 degrees, the so-called true or osculating Lilith at 12 degrees, and the Lilith mean at 16 degrees. And that Lilith mean and Vesta are actually where the point of the pentagram is. And so Lilith deals with our rejected selves, especially the rejected feminine, the parts of ourselves that may be really true and authentic to us, but that may not be socially acceptable, especially in Libra. And there can be this with anywhere we see Lilith. Lilith does not tend to take people's poor opinion of her lying down. There can be a certain amount of reactivity or shadow stuff will get dredged up there. But she's also very good at helping us to find hidden insights, real wisdom within our pain and within our struggles. She corresponds to this empty point in space that is the second focus of the moon. The first one, of course, being the Earth. And the second one within its elliptical orbit is this empty point in space that if you look toward it, you will see where the lunar apogee lies on the other side of that. And so they're not technically the same point, but they're at the same degree. They're at the same point when we look at them. And so Lilith very much is about where is that wisdom in our own emptiness within this space within the void, this space where we may feel isolated or alienated or judged by others. And so having Vesta there, as Vesta is now moving away from this South Node point, there is this real need to pay attention to what have we previously rejected, especially within the context of this Mercury retrograde. What have we rejected when it comes to our beliefs about our connections with others, the social contract, how we move through society, and what our focus is as we are doing that.
Well, that's really good information. I thank you for sharing all that. That's wonderful. And Simon in the future is going to do a show about Lilith to teach us about Lilith. So I'm really excited about that. Well, hopefully we can get that at around the first of the year, work on that one. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the Sagittarius new moon on November 30th here in Seattle at 10:21 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Or on the East Coast, it'll be December 1st at 1:21 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the new moon aspects, we have a trine to Mars and North Node. And that makes a fire grand trine. So that's this moving energy that's flowing back and forth to each other. Why don't you jump in and talk about the aspects?
Okay, so this Sagittarius new moon, we mentioned that at the station retrograde for Mercury, that the moon was in the Balsamic phase, and now we see the Sagittarius new moon, just a little less than a week later, and it is loosely opposing Jupiter. I feel like it's kind of tapping into that Mercury-Jupiter opposition that we saw with the station retrograde. And as you can see, Mercury is already moving back into a tighter opposition, reapplying to the opposition that Mercury had with Jupiter, I believe, on the 18th of November. And then that is forming this loose T-square. This moon, sun and moon in particular, are more tightly square Saturn. And that is a bit of foreshadowing for the Jupiter-Saturn square that's going to be happening in December. I think we're talking about that, aren't we? I think we decided to have a chat about that.
Well, and I think it's important to say that, Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct in December of 2020, and now they're at their first quarter square. So it's like what started then and what's become of it. And I always think of that as now what adjustments are necessary to move forward with that project or that what you were doing.
I think it's really interesting, that you just mentioned that conjunction in 2020, because Jupiter in Gemini, ruled by Mercury, is in a place of information, but also a place of commerce. And commerce, of course, was greatly affected by the pandemic shutdown that corresponded with that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, you know, I feel like we're having these reverberations within our larger society and our economy now that are the result of, things getting kind of reset, taken off their usual track. And I feel like our government and our large corporations and our businesses and whatnot have wanted to, quote unquote, go back to the way it was before, but you can't truly go back to the way it was before. There have been issues within our distribution system, within, how it is that we work. The revelation that a lot of people would prefer just to work remotely and corporations trying to get them back into the office. All of those things have been part of this process of trying to readjust to this new landscape. Especially with Pluto now at that 0 degree of Aquarius, that landscape on an information and a communication and a societal level, it has shifted. We can't go back. We have to go forward. And the square is definitely challenging. It can be tough love. It is, it's not a terribly sympathetic aspect. And so now having this Sagittarius new moon then plugging into that and foreshadowing the tightening of that orb between in the Saturn-Jupiter square that's going to become exact again in December. I feel like this new moon, we are being asked to set some intentions around what we believe, again, as mentioned with that pentagram and with that Mercury retrograde station, in relation to how do we handle the hardships in our life? How do we maintain faith, whatever our faith is in? How do we adjust our faith when we receive new information, or do we? Some folks want to be very, stick in the mud and la 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 la. and I'm not changing no matter what the information is that comes to me. But the reality is, Saturn's that dose of reality. Sometimes we have to make those adjustments whether we want to or not, because Saturn's looking at us and saying, you forgot about this. You need to get more grounded in what's real. And that T-square is requiring, because Saturn is in Pisces, it's requiring that we level up our emotional maturity. Okay.
And put in some work and effort. It kind of makes me think of in December of 2020, Boeing was getting cancellations of airplanes, and Sagittarius is about travel. And now Boeing is kind of going through, they just had a big strike, and they're laying off a bunch of people that they're probably going to have to do some big restructuring to continue on their path. I mean, that would be a good example.
Yeah.
But, they can do it if they put the hard work in. It's just requires that hard work, because I always think of Saturn. You got to put the hours in, you got to put the time in to make it happen.
Yeah, and also, with this grand fire trine then, that sun and moon trine Mars in Leo, who is ruling that North Node in Aries. Mars in Leo is valiant, is can be something of a force of nature when getting angry. And it's passionate. It is acting from the heart. And then when you combine that with that Sagittarius new moon, it's okay, how is belief and heart and passion going to fuel our action to lead us into the direction we need to go, which is that Aries North Node? And what are the big decisions we need to make? There is a decisive quality to Aries. Executive function shows up with Aries. Also, we note the semi-sextile to Juno from the moon. It's pretty tight. It's like a 3-minute orb. And I find that really interesting because Juno, of course, relates to our promises, our oaths, and is in a Mars-ruled sign, if you're looking at the classical rulership of Scorpio. And a semi-sextile it's like the planet, or in this case, the sun and moon, in just one sign away, 30 degrees away from Juno. That sun and moon are in the place that Juno is effectively aspiring to go. Okay. And there can be a little bit of tension in this aspect. It's a slight irksome, irritating aspect, because it's almost like, the planets that are ahead of Juno are like, hey, come on, catch up. And Juno's like, I'm coming already. Okay. Juno in Scorpio has that scorpionic drive and intensity, and truth seeking. This can see the underlying mechanisms and motivations of other people in relation to our promises, and is going to look very poorly on anyone not keeping those promises. And so there's this kind of, this movement then within that semi-sextile from that very intense kind of, personal experience of what is truth, and are you keeping your promises? Are you sticking to your word? That then moves into a more idealistic space, and a space which is potentially more kindly, more tolerant, or can become more self-righteous. Which way is that going to go? And so I feel like this Sagittarius new moon is asking that question. Which way are you going to go? Are you going to be very driven and potentially suspicious of others, knowing that their motives are not necessarily pure? Okay. Or are you going to try to see the best in others, try not to fall into a self-righteous, self-aggrandizing space, and find a way to appreciate people's diverse ways of doing things. Just because somebody does something in a different way from you doesn't mean that they're not actually being honest or true, right? Their honesty and their truth may look different from yours, but not be motivated by bad things. It might have pure, decent, honest motivations. So this new moon is a chance for us to explore that tension between what is our truth and what is a larger truth.
Very well said. And I would say that fire grand trine that I'm thinking that it'll help give us a little bit more energy, pushing us forward. But I would say since, Mercury's retrograde, take your time as much as you can, be considerate of yourself and others, and be patient. And I would say, like, write down some affirmations or something on your bucket list that you want to manifest, because I would think that would help manifest it. It's almost like asking for it and then just kind of let it go, because it'll just, put it out there and it'll come back. Yes, you might have to put in a little bit of effort, but it just feels like one of those times when if you just kind of say it, it manifests. Okay, and then here's the 5-pointed star or pentagram with the new moon, and this one doesn't look all lopsided. It looks a little better. And it switched to well, I guess it was Palace before, right? I think it's still the same players as the one before, if I remember right.
Still the same players, but definitely more Palace here than Mercury. Mercury, of course, is retrograded back away from that Palace position. And now Palace is at 0 degrees of Capricorn. So there is very much that kind of starting energy there, starting and grounding, especially since Palace in this pentagram is now, is in a relationship with Saturn, with the quintile to Saturn. We also see the that Vesta has gone on the other side of that Lilith there. So she stepped out of the Lilith corridor and is now more firmly at that point of the pentagram as well.
Oh, good.
And this pentagram, if I remember correctly, lasts through December 5th.
And I would say that Palace, even though she's just gone into Capricorn, that give her a little bit of time in Capricorn and she'll come up with a new plan and a new strategy. It's like, just be patient, maybe find some information to help with that. And then she would be semi-sextile to Pluto.
Right.
And then Mercury,
so there's sorry, go on. Oh, I was just going to say, so again, there's that semi-sextile relationship that we saw with the new moon and Juno. Now we're seeing that with Pallas and Pluto, where Pluto in that 0 degree of Aquarius is kind of beckoning to Pallas at the 0 degree of Capricorn. Pallas in Capricorn, like being like, okay, now I can make these concrete plans. And Pluto is over there at that 0 degree of Aquarius, being like, yes, and your concrete plans are going to be subject to peer review when you get over here.
Oh, I like that. That's very well said. Okay, Mercury stations direct on December 15th at 6 degrees of Sagittarius in 23 minutes. So, Mercury retrogrades last about 3 to 3.5 weeks typically. So this too shall pass, sometimes about to 4 weeks. So, and on this chart for Seattle, Mercury will be in the 8th house. And then the aspects that Mercury is making when Mercury stations direct is a fire grand trine with Mars and Leo, Mercury and Sagittarius, and the North Node in Aries, and then it forms a kite to Ceres in Aquarius. Would you like to talk about that?
So Ceres at the head of that kite Ceres can relate to hunger, to what nourishes us, to what nurtures us, but can also relate to where we feel deep grief, where we feel a hunger that we're trying to feed there, but in fact need to feed at the polarity point. And in this case, Mars is at the polarity point. Mars is at the tail of the kite, steering the kite, okay, acting like the rudder to a boat. And so this suggests then that hunger will be satiated, our social hunger, our intellectual hunger, but also our hunger for a sense of structure with regard to our world and what we think is reality. Aquarius relates to what is consensus reality? Do we agree with the consensus? Are we going along with it? Where are we challenging it? And then that polarity point of Mars in Leo, at this point, Mars will have gone retrograde. So you see, you've got that retrograde Mars in Leo. And among other things, that has us reconsidering certainly our actions, maybe what we've done in the heat of passion, but also things like leadership. Mars in Leo is a contest of leadership. Who is steering the ship, or in this case, steering this kite? Who is steering us when it comes to helping us to feed our hunger for a social consensus that fits as many different people's needs as possible, okay, that is concerned with the well-being of humanity. And then in order for us to feed that hunger, we now have to kind of backtrack over what have been our actions and have they aligned with what we think is good leadership, what is leading or acting from the heart in a way that is actually helpful to us, as opposed to just being reactive or combative or divisive.
Good. Yeah, I like that how you said that. So I think that's our last slide. Yes, it is. So any advice or for people to focus on or take home with them, or that you want to share?
I really feel like this Mercury retrograde is really asking us to re-examine our belief structures and how do our thoughts feed into that, and how have we been communicating that? How have we communicated our ideals? Have we kind of, gotten in people's faces and been maybe a little too big for our britches? If so, now's the time to kind of reconsider that. And that's not for purposes of self-flagellation or what have you. It's in order to do it better next time, in order to find ways to find the joy in the diverse experience of humanity, and how do we fit into that, and how do our thoughts help us or hinder us when it comes to that. And then, on a more microcosmic level, I do think that this is a great time to examine how do our beliefs affect us on a day-to-day level, because there's all kinds of beliefs. Beliefs aren't just religion or spirituality. Beliefs can be our conditioned behaviors, what we learned from parents and community and society growing up, that sometimes those lessons were good and sometimes they left some damage. So this would be an excellent time for addressing any toxic beliefs that are running under the surface of your day-to-day actions, and start to make some adjustments there. It's Jupiter being in Gemini right now and retrograde and maybe having difficulty, but still wants things to be good for us. It's still jovial. It's still kindly. And Mercury, Mercury's a trickster, but when Mercury is combined with a benefic, is still wanting to be helpful. Okay. And so I really feel like this is a great time to, we can look at some of those things and maybe see some, some humor in it. There's kind of a clown-like quality to Mercury in Sagittarius. It's definitely the class clown placement, but I feel like this could be very kindly and helpful, especially with that trine to Chiron that we saw. It just may feel a little uncomfortable. We may get taken down a notch here or two as a result of that trine to Eris, right? And be reminded that, that we don't have to get all full of ourselves about our beliefs or use them abusively against others. That instead we can hold those beliefs and maybe open up a little bit of kindness, a little bit of sympathy, both for ourselves and others around us as we kind of muddle through all this stuff. We are only human after all.
Yeah, maybe be able to laugh at ourselves even. And with the fire ground trines, it's going to be, it'll feel like a lot's going on and you're busy, but try to allow some space and time for yourself, just to, chill out or put your feet up for 10 minutes or take a nice hot bath. That would be really nice to treat yourself well.
Or
Well,
hang
I
out
think
by the fire.
yes. Or spend some time with a friend, have lunch with a friend or dinner with a friend. Well, Simon, I want to thank you for being here today. This was great, and I look forward to having you back again soon. And so come back and enjoy more episodes with the Astrology Star Sisters. And I do monthly podcasts with Justin and myself. We do 3, the astrology monthly forecast, the full moon forecast, and we're working on a Chiron asteroid series. And then the Astrology Star Sisters is growing, and we have a dwarf planet series, planet stationing, decans using astrology and tarot, and fixed stars. And then I will be on Talk Cosmos on December 1st, talking about the Sagittarius new moon with the archetypal symbols team. And Simon, you can talk about your slide here, please.
Yes. So I can be found on Patreon. I write about the transits there, and I do custom astrological art for my patrons. I'm also a consulting astrologer like Liz is, and so you can find me at iconalchemy.com. And if you are somebody who likes in-person astrological consultations or tarot readings, I actually do these at pop-up markets in the Pacific Northwest, and I will be at the PNW Witches Market Yule celebration in Issaquah during the first full weekend in December. And I will also be reading tarot at the Belltown Art Walk at Crystal Lounge in Belltown on December 13th. So those are a couple of my upcoming events where you can find me in person.
Well, that sounds like fun. And again, I do consultations. I have a newsletter and, of course, my YouTube channel. So sign up, enjoy. And Simon's website is Icon Alchemy, and my website is alightpath.com. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today and all those that come back and watch in the future. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.